Welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast, where each week we speak with brands, icons, innovators, and trailblazers within the fly fishing industry, exploring both the successes and failures they've encountered along the way to become who they are today. But first, if you have not yet subscribed to the podcast or joined our email list, please do so by going to the flyfisherinsiderpodcast.com, or you can also find us on Instagram at flyfisherinsiderpodcast. Now let's begin. Welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. Your guest is Matt Develin. Matt is the owner of the Montana Fishing Film Festival. Here today to tell us more about the film festival is Matt. Matt, welcome to the show, buddy.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
No worries. I'm excited. And I'm sure you're excited because it's a busy time for you coming up here with, in the next few months with all the films and stuff like that. But before we get started and talking full on about the film festival and what you're doing with that and the amazing work that you're doing with that, actually, can you walk us back to your background, your fly fishing background, and then how you got started into creating this amazing film festival?
Sure. It's kind of hard to know where to start, but fly fishing wise, I wasn't born into a family, where fly fishing was a priority or really fishing at all. I grew up on the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland, so roughly, 2,000 miles from where I live today in Missoula, Montana. But it was later in life. I was 18 years old. Now I'm, 34. So feels like it's been a while, but I got into it at age 18, actually in Colorado, tagging along on a family vacation with a good friend of mine. And his parents just said, "Hey, you guys are going on a fly fishing trip tomorrow." And I, like most people, my only exposure to the sport was a river runs through it. And I said, "Sounds good. Cool. What is that? What does that mean?" And, we went, showed up. It was like a little half day. It was like a little half day guided trip, and the guide set us up casting and got us dialed in, and we just kind of went and flailed around on the river. And it's interesting within this sport. Some people are sort of gripped by it, and some people just kind of move on after being exposed to it. And my buddy, who I'm still close with, he never picked up a fly rod again. For me, it was just like this, this lightning bolt where I wanted to learn everything I could about it. I wanted to, match wits with trout. I wanted to tie flies. I wanted to, take it as far as I could. And so I hit the ground really running, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's a lot of people.
Sorry, and then, and then I think kind of bringing in the filming aspect, it started with just a little Sony Handycam, like skateboard film video cam that you would use, and recorded on those little mini discs, which I've got some old footage that I love to look at. I don't even know what dinosaur computer would play that, but I had a friend that was into kind of amateur video production and started, trading off holding a camera on fishing trips because, when he caught a fish, he wanted some footage. And those early years were on the Gunpowder River, which is like 20 minutes north of Baltimore, which is not thought of as trout country, but it's actually a really cool little tailwater fishery. All the fish are wild. And fast forward, college, moved out to Montana, got connected with another friend that was kind of doing a lot of GoPro stuff, which at the time, was one of the best sports action cams that you could get as kind of a consumer filmmaker. And same thing, kind of started holding the camera for him. And the Montana Fishing Film Festival just was born out of a film that we all made on actually a Canon 70D that we rented from. Sorry, we didn't rent it. It ended up being sort of a rental transaction, but we bought it from Costco, used it for 10 days, filmed this film. It had like a 3-lens kit, and then we actually returned it because we were all broke, recently college graduates. And that was the first kind of major-ish production that we did, and we thought the film was cool. It's called 10 Days. You can find it, I don't know, probably somewhere online, but that must have been 8 years ago now, 8 or 9 years ago. And we wanted to show the film to a wider audience than, our friends and family. And it wasn't sort of, quote, good enough to get into the bigger film tours at that time. And so we took it upon ourselves to just rent out a little theater in Missoula and show the thing, and got a little article in the paper and sold tickets at the fly shops. And the night of the event came, and we were like running back home to get camp chairs because more people wanted to sit in the back. And we jammed as many people as the fire code would allow. And we sort of thought, wow, people, there's an appetite in the market for this. And so we've grown from one show 7 years ago to got, I think, 26 tour stops this year over 7 states in the Rocky Mountains and Northwest. So it's kind of snowballed a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I'd say so. You know what? Really cool story, Matt. Definitely really cool. I love your innovation of how you guys went out to Costco and temporarily borrowed a camera. So it just shows that anyone can do it. You said a ton of content in there, and I want to dive into it. So let's go with the film 10 Days, and let's talk about that. What was that? Here you guys are, you rented this camera, essentially, rented to return, and then you went out, you filmed. What did you film? How do you know what to film? Walk us through all that sort of stuff.
Sure. So that first film is called 10 Days, like I was saying earlier. And Bryce McLean, a good friend of mine, who's actually sort of everything's come full circle, and he's officially part of the tour again this year, which is cool. And plans to be moving forward. But we just went out, and kind of a fishery in Southwest Montana. We were all sort of, at that time, young fishing guides, and had just kind of in the last couple of years gotten our start, rowing boats, taking people fishing in the Missoula area. And our season ended, and we wanted to go check out this little fishery in Southwest Montana that flows into a reservoir, and it's kind of known for right place, right time, having some pretty good fishing. Some of the brown trout move up, and get in there and think about spawning. And it was an awesome trip. It was super cold. We only got a couple good hours of filming a day in, but at that point we had filmed enough where we knew the style of film that we wanted to make. And I think a lot of the inspiration came from kind of the action sports of skiing, snowboarding, and surfing, which I think even to this day, a lot of the framework is kind of from ski films, and that was sort of more of the style of that film. It was like, introduce this angler sort of, and then it was almost like we all had like our parts, like, but rather than kind of doing our skateboard tricks or, big deep glades and dropping cliffs on skis and all that stuff, we were, fishing. But I think the style was definitely sort of borrowed from other action sports.
Would you say like because I recall when I was younger I used to watch a lot of Warren Miller movies. Would you say like that was an influence between all you guys in creating these?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the Warren Miller sort of style definitely has some influence on us, but I think that Warren Miller has kind of it's become so mainstream that in a lot of ways we kind of found more inspiration in like snowboarding and kind of skateboard, sort of a little bit of a counterculture movement, which I think in certain ways is still a space that we're occupying with the Montana Fishing Film Festival as something a little bit different, with a little bit of a counterculture sort of, if you don't fit in somewhere else, you know, we've got a place for you kind of vibe.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that vibe, because that's kind of what makes you guys so special as well, right? Is because you do have that vibe about you and that different atmosphere as well, which is a really cool, unique thing that you guys are doing. So let's talk about that, and let's talk about your concept and why you're so encompassing like that, and why do you think you feel that the community is responding with the reactions that you guys are getting currently to,
I mean,
to that?
I think so. It's a good question, Greg. I think that the community is kind of responding to what we're doing because since sort of the dawn of the sport of fly fishing, I think fly fishermen and women, fly anglers have always been very aware of authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And we are truly a grassroots organization. It's just me and then one other guy that's going to be helping me on the road, but it's sort of ridiculous that it's just me, but that's still kind of where we are and how small we are. And I think that there's something romantic about a couple dudes sort of trout bumming and driving around in a truck, showing, you know, you've got kind of the person who owns and runs the company actually taking the films around and showing them. And I think it's kind of a throwback to, for instance, some of the larger film tours. The F3T started with
Mm-hmm.
a group of guys, you know, the motive fishing guys or AEG, who have gone on to do a lot of really cool stuff. They were doing the GeoBass for a while. They're now on Discovery Channel, but the F3T started with those guys, that group of fishing buddies, essentially having an idea. Hey, let's get a block of films. Let's show them ourselves, you know, owner operated. And they took it around the country and you know, beat the pavement. And it had this awesome local grassroots vibe. And I think it's because you can't have that. You can't fake that. And
No.
we have that sort of out of necessity, because that's where we're at with it. And so
Mm-hmm.
I've always been aware of sort of keeping it non-corporate, and the fact that people are starting to respond and kind of, you know, one of our biggest battles is just people hearing about us. And I think once people kind of come to our space or our community, they usually like what they find there, I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
And, you know,
yeah.
I remember, so I lived in Charleston for a while. I've lived in kind of a fair amount of fishing towns up and down the East Coast, and
I wonder why.
Montana. yeah. But so I was kind of chasing redfish and doing the southern life thing in Charleston, and that was my first exposure to the F3T coming through. And at that time, it was it was that group of guys that I was talking about, Dad and Chris and Brian and others. I know there's others, but they came to this little theater. You know, there were like 45 people at the show, and I think all of them from coming into the fly shop I worked at, the Charleston Angler at the time, and it was just this awesome kind of local event. And you know, that was my only exposure to film tour for a number of years until kind of I moved back to Missoula, and you know, by that time it had gotten a lot bigger and gathered a lot of steam. But I think that in a lot of ways it reminds people of sort of the trout bomb days.
Do you think, like, when people, and I want to jump in here because, Matt, do you think when people like look at what you're doing, they see it on film, like, you're almost like selling the dream of the trout bomb days? I mean, like, just hearing you talk makes me, like, you know, like, picture you driving around, you're fly fishing, and you're doing this. It almost makes me want to give up my job and just do that, right? But I mean, you know, I said almost, but you know, like, it's just, do you think that's what the fascination is when people look at the grittiness and the vibe that you guys are putting out like that, and they're like, man, I would need to be a part of this. I want to be a part of that. Because that's what us fly fishers, I feel many of us fly fishers, right, are attracted to, like you said earlier, right? It's that vibe that we put out, right? So do you think that's a part of it?
Absolutely. It's kind of selling this lifestyle, this dream, and it's not new. It's always been
That's
the dream.
That's the funny part,
you know, to just chase fish, you know, and that's part of why more and more what we're doing has become focused on trout, because trout is the international language. You know, everybody can relate to, you know, a trout in shallow water slowly eating a dry fly. That, you know, that is the heartbeat of the sport itself. And I think, you know, I've sort of rebelled against this whole like destination fishing vibe, and it's not because I have anything against saltwater fish. I'm a saltwater licensed captain, and I've spent a lot of my life around salt and brackish water, and I've chased tarpon and permit and bonefish, and they're awesome, but that's not a realistic echelon of the dream for me. And I think for 95% of the anglers out there, it's not. It's a great aspirational thing, but sort of looking at, hey, what can we do? What species can we all find in our collective backyards? Yeah. That to me feels so much more real.
The common ground.
And so much more common ground. Yeah. It's more sustainable.
Yeah. I mean, in Canada, we got trout. We don't have redfish, but we got trout. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
So we're speaking trout right now, like you just said. And it's like that with many other countries, right? Like a lot of countries have trout. And yeah, if like you say, it's a universal language. Trout. Love it. It's you know, I might have to borrow that one.
So that's the language. You know, that should be, you know, that should be one of our taglines. We speak trout. Mm-hmm. Copyright. I've got my lawyers on it right now. So if you're listening to this,
you know what?
Don't even try.
We'll call this episode "We Speak Trout" just for you.
I love that. That's great.
Done. I wrote it in my show notes. You know, Matt. So the passions there, the passions for trout. Do you guys, like, with the name Montana, like, I feel like fishing film fest and you know, like everyone else, I always say the word fly in front of it. Do you only do Montana, or is that what you're like are you planning to expand?
No, that's
what I want to know.
Like that's such a good question. So it's one of those things where the film fest started here in Missoula, Montana, and we had no plans for anything beyond one show. we didn't even know if it was going to be annual, but it just turned into this thing where the support was there, to a degree. And I can be pretty stubborn when I get an idea. I go 100% at it, and so I was determined to make it work. And part of that was naturally expanding it, and not only do we go outside of the state to show the films, we have content from much wider from a much wider range of places in Montana. We've got films from this year from Alaska, Michigan, of course, Montana, Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming. And so we're actually in 7 states with the tour, and the content itself is representing multiple states. We have had content from Alberta, British Columbia in the past. So it's not a narrow framework that the films have to fit into. They just have to be unpretentious people fishing close to home.
I'm gonna get, I think we're gonna have to elaborate a bit more on what the criteria is, or what you guys are looking for than just that. So,
sure.
Like, walk me through what you guys are looking for, like a submission. Are you looking for, like walk us through, not so much just you guys too, what your audience or what your viewers are looking for as well, because that's really what it comes down to. Here's what the viewers, you're giving the viewers what they want, as well as what you have set out as criteria as well, if I'm not mistaken.
So I think that's another really good question, and probably deserves its own podcast to really dive into. But I myself wear a lot of hats, and one of those hats is as a filmmaker. I sort of have a separate career personally as a filmmaker, and sometimes the two worlds mix and sometimes they don't. This year, I personally have 2 films in the tour, and as a filmmaker, what interests me is always human element, the story. I was always going to be a writer growing up. That was the job that I could see myself doing, and I went to school for that. And as things have shifted and transmuted, it's become storytelling through film. And I've always had an emphasis for the film festival on story over things like production value and sort of fish porn. I'd rather show something that was shot on a GoPro, but sort of gives the audience a chance to feel like they were there and feel like they walk away knowing the subjects, than I would want to show something that was, beautifully shot in 12K resolution, but was just music and huge dry fights for 10 minutes. I think that just gets old.
Mm-hmm. It can. It definitely, it can get old. I mean, there's a lot of people out there doing that, for sure. I can agree with you on that.
Yeah. There's plenty of people doing that out there, and it's saturated in a way. And I think the perfect fly fishing film is a mixture of both. But to me, a film's unsuccessful if there's not a strong story element.
Bringing a story in, I agree, Matt, is absolutely key. For any film, any film, every film needs a story. Otherwise, it's no different than putting up still images on your computer screensaver and adding music, right?
Right.
Yeah, Matt, I was going to ask you, I know you just recently did, or you were involved with a film that you sent me to take a look at recently, called The Streak.
Yeah.
Was that? Can you tell me?
Yeah. So
Can you tell us a bit about that? Because I know that has us. I watched a bit of it, and it has a pretty strong, compelling story element to it as well, right?
yeah. So the streak is sort of my opus up until this point, I think, and the reason being because it's been such a long time coming. I think in a lot of ways, it's the story of two lifelong friends. One of them actually being Bryce McLean, who I mentioned was partnering with the Film Fest this year, and who sort of was there in the beginning with my early filmmaking. And one of the subjects is his father, Chris McLean, and his best friend, Rick Branzel. And these are two guys that live down in the Bitterroot Valley, south of Missoula. And if you know the area, the Bitterroot River's world famous. It's a fantastic fishery, and just a really special sort of hallowed place to go trout fishing. And they have a 19-year streak of catching a trout from a drift boat every month of the year. And it just started, truck just drove by. And it just started from them realizing that they were pretty much doing it anyway. And all of a sudden they decided to keep track. And, you know, the streak's gone through battles with their health, you know, raising children, wild weather. As you can imagine, a lot happens in almost 20 years. Mm-hmm. And they've found a way to keep it alive. And I think I'm really proud of that film, and that is going to be shown this year as part of the lineup. I think we're going to play it last at the shows. And it ends up being really a story about friendship and family and life, with sort of the river as, I would say, a character in the film, as much as it is about sort of fishing, fly fishing. You know, it's there's no streak without fly fishing, but
yeah,
to me, it's about so much more than that.
Yeah, that's the story, and that's what I'm getting at. The story is what draws,
Yeah,
and it drew me in, and I was compelled, and I watched. Do you know what I mean? Super.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, I think fly fishing brings you to so many cool places and allows you to meet so many people. And after you've been involved in the sport for a certain amount of time, I think you kind of have this moment where you realize that the fishing is central to what you're doing, but it's
secondary.
It's more just a conduit for all of these rich life experiences, and that's why people spend so much time and money pursuing fish with a fly rod, I think.
Yeah. Like I've always said, yeah, once you do it long enough and you meet the relationships, and for the relationships, the fishing comes secondary. And I can't remember who I was talking to, but I know we've had a podcast and we talked about that as well. The fishing comes secondary. Once, you know, when you go to IFTD and stuff like that, like it becomes secondary. Or if you go to your film festival, and you see those friends every time that year, you know what I mean, while you're on the tour, it's secondary. It's about those relationships and maintaining those and having fun. I agree with you on that, Matt. So speaking of the film fest,
I agree.
yeah, for sure. Like, it's super important to nurture those relationships. I think so. I do want to jump to the film festival, and I want to talk about what you got planned for this year and where you're going with it, who your lineup is, if we can. Some of the films. I don't know if you're allowed to. Can you give us a sneak peek?
Sure.
Yeah. Like.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No problem. So this year is our 7th year, of the film festival, which is kind of shocking. But I've got a 3.5-year-old little boy named Noah, and once you become a parent, there's this like melting time effect where it seems like you just lose a month here and there. And you know, growing up, people that you perceive as old say, you know, time flies when you get older. You know, enjoy everything. And when you're young, you don't get it, but at a certain point, you sort of realize, like, wow. And so somehow this is the 7th year of this thing, and pretty soon it'll be a decade old. But we are going all over Montana this year. Missoula, Bozeman, Helena, Butte, Billings, Whitefish, Phillipsburg, probably somewhere else. We're going to be doing a little loop through Utah and Colorado, also Wyoming while we're down there, and a big loop through the Pacific Northwest, Spokane, Seattle, Portland, Bend. Corvallis is a new show this year.
Okay.
And we've got a handful of independent hosted shows with Trout Unlimited groups around mostly Idaho and Montana this year. So a lot on the horizon this year. If you live in the Rocky Mountain West / Pacific Northwest, there's probably a show somewhere near you with hopefully more the next year and more after that, and sort of try to kind of share what we're doing and share the love of fly fishing, which is sort of what our poster's about this year.
Yeah.
You want me to talk about the films?
Yeah. Like, let us know who's gonna, for sure, who the filmmakers are, what the names of the films are, the inspiration of
Sure.
some of the films. Yeah, like, we want to know everything. Open book.
So we've got. I'm really proud of this group of films this year. I think that they all sort of complement each other and really represent what we're trying to do and what we want to do moving forward. And we've got, you know, we never have enough female anglers represented, but we're getting there. You know, there's at least 3 of the 7 films that have women in them, so that's a great step, I think. And usually we have 10 to 12 films with some shorter ones, but this year we've got a couple longer pieces. The Streak is like 24 minutes long, so it's you know, it's really kind of feels like a comprehensive documentary. And we've got a few that are you know, standard 7 or 8 minutes. So it flows really well as a group of films. We've got a film shot in Alaska called 3 Days North from Western Fly Media, guy that lives in Oregon. And Eric Berkner, he's made films for us for quite a while. I bet 5 years now he's been involved in the festival. And we've got another film actually out of Oregon called Reset. And that film I'm really excited about. It's about a combat veteran in the Army, of course, and his struggle with coming back home after being medically discharged and sort of picking up the pieces and figuring out life without his vocation, which, as many of us do, was wrapped up in his identity, and dealing with PTSD and finding fly fishing as this healing element, and some of the work that he's doing with Project Healing Waters to bring other veterans into the sport. And that one I'm really excited about. Strong story element in that piece. And we've got we love trout, but we've shown carp films in the past and smallmouth films. Really any backyard species, as I say.
Yeah.
But we've got a smallmouth film from Michigan that was filmed by the guys at the Fly Fish Journal, and that's a really fun piece, beautifully shot. We've got sort of a comedic film from a guy out of LA. Actually lives like on the edge of Hollywood, but grew up in Montana and attended the University of Montana. And this is sort of like his story of coming back home, and it's got a lot. It's got a lot of cool stuff going on. I like that. I like that film a lot, and I can't think of what that one's called, but I'll have to edit that out.
Yeah, I'll just send it to me, and I'll make sure I put it in there.
Do I need to? Oh yeah, okay. So I'll just send it to you.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes.
I don't even know if
I probably won't even edit this out, because you know what? This is so awesome. Like, you're just, you're honest. You got so many films going on this year, so for sure. And I know you guys have lots.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you have lots.
Yeah.
I want to circle back to Reset. I just I literally, it's funny. I'm sitting here and I'm like, I just talked about this film the other day with somebody. And I'm trying to think of the guy's name. I remember his Instagram handle. I think I do. But yeah, he's involved with Trestle, and there's a ton of stuff.
Yeah. What film are you talking about?
Reset.
Oh yeah.
With the combat veteran. He wrote a blog for me recently. We just did a little collab on that as well. And again, it's funny. Everything just keeps circling back to this film. So I'm dying to see Reset when it comes out, personally. So, I have to now.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead.
I said, yeah, I have to now. I mean, it just keeps the name and the film just keeps popping up in my life. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's a sign. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I think John at Trestle was actually the go-between on that, because we've shown a Trestle film in the past, and I've worked with them for a couple of years. They're one of the sponsors this year. And so, just kind of part of that community that we have, and some of these brands that are, trying to make it and sort of finding some success in the industry, but still in many ways kind of fringe brands. I think that we find a lot in common.
Yeah.
And so it's been great, working with Trestle and showing Reset this year is just kind of part of that relationship.
Sounds like it. You mentioned the sponsors. Let's talk about the sponsors. Is like, do you go out searching for sponsors, or guys like saying, "Hey, Matt, I want to get involved." Like reach out to let us know how that's all working.
The sponsor thing is interesting, and sponsors and sponsorships and ambassadors and all of that language that gets sort of thrown around in the sport these days is, I've been doing this for like 17 years or something, and it's pretty recent that has become such a focus. When I got into the sport, it was not cool. It was not cool to fly fish. You kind of were involved in the sport because you were bitten by the bug and you enjoyed the solitude and you found some kind of a connection out there. And now, sort of with social media and just with the march of time or whatever, it's become something different. And I think it's great as long as new people come to the sport. But I think there's this I don't know I don't know what to call it. There's this phenomenon where, I've personally been exposed to people that are kind of new to the sport, and it's like they've got this goal of wanting to be sponsored or wanting to be an ambassador or something before they've really sort of given their life over to the sport or something. And it's like, those things come in time, and there's no substitution for time in the sport. Like I work with a rod company, and that's different from the film festival, but that's just from years and years of doing nothing but fishing, and guiding and trying to be the best guide I could be. I'd spent a decade doing that full time in Missoula, and those opportunities come along, and so much of it is who you end up being introduced to and exposed to. As it's not, there's no written or physical exam. There's no metric who's a better fisherman than who. But that's the end of my soapbox on the personal sponsorship thing. But as far as sponsors for the tour, that's another interesting topic, because I think in a lot of ways the mainstream fly fishing industry has kind of turned their back on what we're doing. And I've thought a lot about this, and I don't know. I don't have an awesome answer for why that is. Last year was our best sponsor year, and this year, it's really lean. Like, the Montana Film Office has always been a strong partner, and this year, Craft Drift Boats built us a boat to take around and use, and that's awesome. But really getting those big brands to kind of come and commit cash to our cause has been really difficult. And I think that we all need to be aware that the sport is becoming more and more corporate. And so what we're doing is really not. And so I think for me, I'm starting to take pride in that, because all that I really care about is our attendance and our festival goers having an awesome experience.
Your audience, true to your roots. I get it. I totally get it. So, and it's unfortunate that, because I know, in one hand you need the sponsorship donations to expand and grow and show these amazing films and works of art to more and more eyeballs, right? So, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, man. I totally get it, right? So, but
it is, it's hard to grow. It's hard to grow without being infused with some monetary support, and that's why I end up doing so much. And I can't do that. I can't do that forever. But right now I'm sort of, I feel like Atlas some days, kind of trying to keep the film fest rolling and respond to emails, and it's like just people reaching out to table at the events, and working with one fly shop that might be one of 6 fly shops for that one tour stop, and then we've got 26, and it gets to be overwhelming. But I'm just working as hard as I can, and I think it's totally worth it when we have a great, successful show and a fun crowd, and you have somebody come up with their 8-year-old kid, and they're sort of like, the kid tells you, I really had fun because that reminds me of stuff that my dad and I do on the weekends, and like that's just like so affirming.
Yeah, I do know. And I can really relate too, right? As a podcaster, I mean, I do a lot. I got 2 shows, and we're doing blogs and just lots of things, our travel programs, all that sort of stuff. So I definitely get where you're coming from. Again, father of 2 kids and full-time job, all that sort of stuff. So, Matt, I mean, definitely know what you're saying. Yeah, it's a challenge at times, right? So
it is. Yeah. It's a grind. I mean, I think
there's things that make it worth it, right? When we get like the response from people, or when I do kick-ass interviews, and you know, and people are like, man, thanks, this is awesome. Or, you know, like this interview, someone says, hey, like, I didn't know this was like this. And now I've learned something. Like, that to me makes me happy. Getting your story out there and sharing that, and getting others people's story out there and sharing that, like, and expanding and growing and bringing more ears to the table here to learn about something is totally worth it.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to have a love for the sport and for what you're doing,
Yeah.
or you'll never make it, because there's a heck of a lot of work. You know, anytime you're trying to kind of cut your own path, and I think I sort of alluded to some of the disillusionment that I have with the industry, and with sort of like where some of the younger people getting involved in the sport are kind of taking their cues from, and all of that stuff. And I think, you know, I could have those viewpoints and sort of let them fester and turn into sort of like the crotchety old dude on the river that is, you know, cursing at all the young kids. And then, like, for me, I made a decision that if the sport's that important to me, I better do what I can to try to change that. If you don't like the narrative, we've all got a chance to be involved. And I'm not saying that I have the roadmap, but I think that showing people good stories and showing people things that are real is only going to kind of help weather that storm of sort of this explosion in the sport right now, and the growing pains associated with that, you know?
Yeah, I do know. I agree with that for sure. You know, we need that growth though. Fly fishing in our sport needs that growth. We just do, for so many reasons, and I think you would agree with that as well. So, you know, it's just how
we speak trout.
Exactly. I love
fluent in trout. I mean, one of my favorite, when you're a fishing guide, it's like Groundhog.
You know what?
Day, you know what I mean?
You know what you got to do? You got to make up some like bumper stickers or something for the tour. We speak trout, and just hand them out. See if
I'm gonna do it.
See if it catches on.
I'll send you some.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick them on my beer fridge, and I'll put one on my boat and truck. So do it up. Yeah, we speak trout, and then underneath Montana fishing film fest. Yeah. Love it, man. I freaking love it. So
yeah, I don't even know. That was just like some alchemy there. It just occurred.
There you are.
We were talking.
I almost want to stay like live on air.
It was absolutely live on there. That was I hadn't thought about that, and it truly is the international language of fly fishing. It's trout, and I really feel like at a certain point the industry started to kind of turn their back on trout. Like trout weren't cool enough, and for me, trout are the coolest, and trout will always be enough because they remind me of the simple things about the sport, like just trying not to get tangled in the rhododendron bush behind me on the gunpowder, and spending 12 hours on the river and like forgetting to eat lunch and being so immersed in it that I was addicted to that sort of loss of outside influences, you know, while I was on the river. And as a fishing guide, when I'm introducing people to the sport, you know, I tell them that I wish I could go back to those days, because you can never get those days back. So anybody that's sort of just finding the sport and really feeling like it's something that they want to be involved in for a long time, just enjoy it, because those are the purest days of the sport. You're just involved in, and you just want to catch some fish.
Yeah.
And you just want to be out there.
Yep, you're making me want to get out there right now as we speak. So everything's froze up here right now, so I'm a little out of luck.
Oh man, that's brutal. It's Montana's really not too bad. Where we are, it's going to be like 54 on Friday. So I'm going to get out and fish. I think I've been working like 20 days straight right now and film fest and editing projects, and we get out and do a little fishing on the Bitterroot. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, before you get out and before you get going here, I got a few last questions. Few last questions for you. First question. Of course, we got a nice phone call coming in here. First question is, where, if someone wanted, is it too late to submit for the 2020 films?
I mean, I never say no. Like last
we'll
year.
Just leave it at that. How's that sound? We'll just say,
yeah.
You never say no.
I never say no.
So if someone wanted to set this listening and said, "Holy shit, I was out there. I swore on my own show. Never do that. I'm out there. I got awesome GoPro video. I want to, he's gonna take it." Where would they reach out to you?
So they would just drop me a line at mtfishingfilmfest@gmail.com, or just visit our website, and there's easy ways to go there, or follow us on Instagram. We kind of suck at Instagram, so we want more followers, and kind of we want to be able to share what we're doing with more people. So if you want to find us on that platform, it's just at MT Fishing Film Fest, and you can send me a message on there. Any and all messages will get funneled directly to me, because there's really just me.
Oh,
and I think one thing I want to say that I don't know where it fits in, but as a filmmaker and as somebody who has sort of done it for long enough to have a little bit of success in the industry, and I've had films and that have played in the bigger, international fly fishing film tour. Sorry, that's the fly fishing film tour, the F3T, which is international. The names get confusing, but I've sort of done some stuff on that side of it, and as a filmmaker, I always watch the submissions, and I really enjoy working with people on films. And there's been many times where if I have the time, I've helped someone cut something together or restructure something, and the editing process is so important to the final cut of a film. And if you send me something and it sort of doesn't get in this year, that it's usually going to be part of a relationship that might lead to us being able to do something down the road. But having a role as kind of a mentor to up and coming filmmakers within this tiny little niche genre has been one of the more fulfilling aspects of running the Montana Fishing Film Festival. And along that line, I'm actually working with the Rocky Mountain School of Photography, which is a teaching institution here in Missoula that's been established for 30 years, and it's got a great reputation. We're actually going to be offering an outdoor filmmaking course this summer in August, and with a heavy fly fishing focus, and I'm going to be one of the 2 instructors there. And so that's just sort of part of that goal of being able to mentor young filmmakers, and that part of the process has been really important.
Really cool stuff you got going on, Matt. I'm going to put all that in the show notes. I'm also going to ask you right now if your tours, they're going to be on your website, no doubt, right? So they're listed on your website.
Yeah, they are.
So anyone that wants to know,
we've got most of them live. The Utah and Colorado shows are listed, but we don't have ticketing live yet. All that's coming soon, but they're not till May.
It's all good. You'll have it on your site by the time we're up and going, so that's good. Matt, dude, we spoke a lot of trout, so
Yeah, we did. We absolutely did.
I definitely want to thank you for speaking trout with me, and I also want to thank the audience and the listeners for speaking trout as well, or listening to us speak trout. So thank you guys, and definitely you know where to find Matt Develin and the Montana Fishing Film Fest. On his, it's a tongue twister, but there we are.
It is.
All right.
That's why it's harder with more F.
It is. All right, guys, I'm going to let you all go. Thanks. You've been listening to the Fly Fishing Insider podcast. If you like this podcast episode, please let us know. Leave a review and subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast listening platform.